I live on a tropical island, but it's not as you would expect. A lot of people ask me what it's like to live on a tropical island, and I thought I'd share, but through the lens of leadership. So how about we look at how living on a tropical island has challenged my leadership? So I've recently moved from Australia, a big island, to the Dominican Republic, a teeny little island in the Caribbean. And yes, while there are some amazing benefits to living here in the Dominican Republic, it's a beautiful island, has its advantages, there's also some disadvantages. And so to share what it's like to live here, maybe satisfy your curiosity, and hopefully you'll learn something about your leadership of how it has challenged my leadership. But the first way in which living on a tropical island has challenged my leadership is the limited resources. Yes, living in a very, very small island like this, you don't have access to as many things. You'll be amazed where you just think you're used to just ordering something from Amazon or just going down to the shop, and at the shops you've got a variety of anything you want to choose from. But here in the Dominican Republic, because it's a small island, we don't have a big variety of options. So it's really challenging to have a limited number of resources available to you. But you know what? In leadership, quite often we have limited resources available to us, and we have to make do with what we have. So you have to get creative. Let me share some of the ways in which I've gotten creative here in the Dominican Republic with my resources. Well, first of all, setting up this studio, you'd not believe the amount of things that you would just assume that you could have access to. Certain types of glue, or certain types of string, or certain hooks, or you'll be surprised at what I was used to buying in Australia, I just couldn't find here. And so I was very limited with what I could have. So I would have to go to the shops, or go down to the markets, or go to all different areas and try to be resourceful and get creative with my resources. And so I was able to put together a lot of these things, like the way that my soundproofing or sound treatment is laid out around the room. Let's just say it's very creative. So if you're limited with resources, make sure you get really creative as a leader. Also, with limited resources, you have to plan ahead. Yes, you have to plan. You have to plan with time and money. Time, because you need to schedule out the things that you do in the time that you can afford to do them. But you also need to schedule that time as to when those resources are available. For example, living on this island, yes, I love shopping on Amazon, but I don't have the advantage of the one day or overnight or same day delivery as I used to take advantage of in Australia. Because yes, I can get it delivered even same day to my address in the United States. Yes, I have to have a special courier service to have things delivered to, and then they put it on a ship, and then maybe 2 weeks later, I might get it here in the Dominican Republic. So you really have to plan ahead when you want to do things as to when those things will arrive to when it's available. So you actually need to be very careful with your timing of things to make sure you plan ahead with your resources. And you're the same when you're a leader as well. You may have people resources that are only available at a certain time, so you need to plan ahead for that. You may have things on back order, especially with this supply crisis that this supply chain crisis we've been facing. You know that it's important. You need to plan ahead to when those resources are available to put that plan into action. Also, make sure that you plan ahead with the finances, because living on the island, when we buy things, if they're over a certain amount, we get taxed. Also, the courier charges me per weight. So when I buy something from Amazon, I always have to scroll down and find out what the weight of that product is and add that cost onto the cost of the product and see if it's worthwhile. And then if it's over a certain price, like I said, that we get taxed a big amount. And so you have to plan ahead with your money, because things just cost more, as well as you have to plan ahead with your time. And that's the same with you as a leader. We really need, with limited resources, sometimes things just cost more when we have limited resources. I know that old saying of the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. It's that way when we're leading something as well. That usually when we've got limited resources, we're normally having to find alternative ways of doing things, which might be a little bit more expensive or cost more in the long run because we're trying to half do things or cut corners, and it just costs us more. So make sure you plan ahead when you have limited resources. Now, I mentioned before that you need to get creative with limited resources, and that's a real challenge because you don't always have the best solution. I know you might want to buy the best camera or the best microphone or the best lighting for your studio, and you may just not have those available. Luckily, I was able to get people to bring those things from the United States, but I had to plan ahead. I had to plan that when they were traveling, I would buy it at the time and get it delivered to the hotel that they would be at, and then they would smuggle it in for me. And that's just the way it had to be, right? But we sometimes just have to settle for a lower quality of product or a lower quality of resource. And we as leaders tend to push ourselves to be perfect. But let me encourage you, don't aim for perfection, aim for excellence. And it's a little bit of a definition that I've kind of made up myself, that especially when you have limited resources, aim for excellence. What is excellence? What's the difference between perfection and excellence? Perfection is everything is exactly right, the best it ever could be. Whereas excellent is I have done the best I can with the resources available to me. I've done the best that I can in the time. I've done the best that I can with the budget that I have. I've done the best with the people that I have. I've done the best with the things that I have. And so aim for excellence when you're getting creative and when you're planning ahead with limited resources. The second way living on a tropical island has really challenged my leadership is small town thinking. Now, please understand, I'm not having a go at the Dominicans or anything like that. But you would know people from a small town. You would have met people from a small town. They just think differently, right? They really do. They have this kind of, how would you say, an isolated view of the world because they're stuck in their own little world in a small town and they just think differently. Now, it can be an advantage sometimes, and it can actually be a disadvantage other times. And I'm sure there's times when you're leading people that you are speaking to people with a limited view or a limited capacity or a limited way of thinking. And there's a couple of ways in which living on a tropical island has really challenged my leadership when it comes to dealing with people that have a small town mindset. The main of those things was probably the most challenging for me to get over. So not everyone thinks like me. And let me tell you, not everyone thinks like you. And the reason why people don't think like you is because you're a leader. And not everyone can be a leader. We're all called to different things. It's not that we are better. It's just because we think differently doesn't make us better. We just think differently, not better. That's what I want to emphasize. Like this limited thinking, it has a negative connotation, but we just think differently. Like, so for example, I overanalyze everything. I always ask why in every situation. And I remember when I first got married to my wife, who's Dominican, and I was sitting there and asked her, why do you do that thing? And I used to get really frustrated because when I'd ask her why she'd say something or why she'd do something, she'd be like, I don't know. And I thought she was trying to hide something from me. I thought she was just like, oh, she doesn't want to communicate with me or she doesn't care about me. But then I realized, no, she just literally doesn't think that way. She just has a limited thinking. Not in a negative way. She just doesn't think like that. So the main thing you need to learn when it comes to dealing with people with a small town mindset or maybe a limited way of thinking is not everyone thinks like you, and that's okay. And the key to that is actually empathy. Having a good understanding of where other people are and where they come from and where they're coming from and their worldview, etc. And taking that into consideration will actually help you overcome that challenge of the limited thinking. But we can't just accept that, oh, that's just them and then just kind of leave them in the corner and us keep going. We still need to work together. You know, we are one body, but many parts, as the Bible says. And so we've all got to play our part. We all have our unique purposes. And our job as a leader is to make sure we impart vision into those people to help expand their thinking. Because they're not thinking limited because they're stupid or they lack intelligence. They just have a limited thinking because that's all they've been exposed to. And so it's our job to cast a bigger vision for them, help expand their horizons, help them grow in their thinking. I mean, imagine how awesome this would be if the people that served under you, the people that you led, imagine if all of them were really grateful for the time that they had with you, because now they can look back and say, that person really expanded my thinking. I now can have a much better view of the world, or a much different perspective on this topic because of my time with that leader. Wouldn't that be amazing? So when dealing with people with small town thinking, or that limited thinking that you're leading, have empathy for them and understand not everyone thinks like you, but also make sure that you are helping them expand their thinking and explore new perspectives. And the third way that living on a tropical island has challenged my leadership is island time. Yeah, have you ever heard of island time? Now, if you're in Australia, you probably would have heard of it. New Zealand, you definitely know about island time. But island time is pretty much, I mean, you know those people that an hour late is probably early for them, or maybe they're not even able to set a time. That's one thing that's really challenged me about living here in the Dominican Republic, is they operate on island time. They can't commit to anything. It's always about, like, well, let's set this time, like, to meet next week. Oh, give me a call on that day and we'll set something up. Like, that's the way it is here. Or when someone says, yeah, I'm just leaving now and I'm on my way, 4 hours later they turn up. Or they say they're going to meet at a certain time and they are at least a half an hour late. I know you know some of those people. That's what it's like here living in the Dominican Republic, is time is not a consideration for them here. They are just so laid back and so casual about time. And you know what? It is frustrating. But I have found a way to be able to deal with it, especially as a leader trying to run a business and trying to lead people here in the Dominican Republic. The hardest lesson I've had to learn is just be patient. I'm not the most patient person. I'm very high strung. I'm drive, go. And I must admit, it's challenged my leadership, but it's caused me to be a much more patient leader. So if you're dealing with anyone that seems to be on a little bit of a slower time zone than you, hey, maybe there's something you can learn from that and learn to be a little patient. Okay, being patient is one thing, but you also need to set your expectations. I now no longer have the expectation that people are going to be on time. And so I plan everything around it. When we book something for, let's say we'll meet at 10 o'clock, I make sure that I don't book anything else for a couple of hours, because I know that they're going to be a little late, and then when we catch up, it's going to be a lot longer and we're going to run late anyway. I also don't plan to go out and do a bunch of things. I spread everything out because I just know that things are just going to take longer than anyone tells me to. So I plan accordingly. But I said there's advantages to this island time, right? And there's one thing that I've really learned, that I've enjoyed learning here in the Dominican Republic. And I'll kind of clarify it and just say people are people, not tools. Okay, so people are people. And I know you go, yeah, sure. But people are people. And too often we as leaders just kind of look at people as tools. People are just things we use to achieve our outcome, right? But here in the Dominican Republic, getting outcomes is not important, but spending time with friends is. And everything's social. We have like 2 or 3 barbecues with friends and family a week, right? Like it's just, there's always something on. Catch up with someone one night, and then the next day we're over their place having another barbecue. Like it's just crazy how social everyone is here. And it has actually forced me to step back and not just look at getting outcomes from people, but just catch up and have fun, hang out, build relationships with people, which actually caused me to be a better leader as I'm leading the people that I'm leading, that it's not just all about the outcome. The manager of our building here, every time I catch up with him, I'm always like, hey, I need this done. And he's like, hi, Craig, good morning. How are you? And I'm like, oh yeah. So he's trained me to go, just take time. I'll go in, rather than just telling him the things that need fixed, I sit down. How's your family? I get to know him. How's things going? What's happening in your life, and all those sorts of things. And it's just caused me to really know and understand that people are people. So how living on a tropical island challenged my leadership is dealing with limited resources, getting creative with those, planning and scheduling out things, making sure I plan ahead, also working with excellence with let's say, not so awesome resources. I've been able to manage that small town thinking with empathy and also helping expand people's mindsets. And third is I've actually gotten the benefit of island time. I've gotten a little bit more relaxed. I've been able to plan around unreliable people, and I've gotten to know that people are people too. Hey, I hope you've learned from some of my little personal everyday challenges to see how you can be a better leader. So give that a thumbs up if you've liked it. Put a comment below if you've ever lived on an island or you know someone who seems to be living on island time. And hey, if you've enjoyed this content and want to watch more, consider subscribing to our channel.